Welcome to the Bond Report. Today we are going to be talking about urban vertical farming. So let me ask you this. What if the solution to feeding our growing cities was not out in traditional farm fields, but in buildings? Could urban vertical farming be the future for sustainable food? So could you give us a little bit of what you interpret as the history for the farms?
Well, vertical farming is more or less what it sounds like. It is planting vertically or in layers of flat fields which are stacked.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a history of this. This idea didn't come out of nowhere.
Okay.
From the very beginning, 600 BC or so, there were the famous hanging gardens of Babylon. They don't exist today, but they had the idea of saving space by stacking plants. And then another advance came about 600 years ago with the invention of greenhouses, which meant now you could control the environment. You didn't depend on nature.
So during the Renaissance?
During the Renaissance area. And little by little...
And when was that?
Renaissance, the 14th, 13th, 14th, 15th century on.
Okay.
And little was done technologically until this very century, when there seemed to be an explosion of technological developments, which we will discuss.
So what happened in the 1930s?
Well, we had the hydroponics developed in the 1930s, which was another advance, actually growing without use of soil.
And then you know what I heard? I heard that aquaponics was then sort of developed after that. And that was using a system of agriculture which sort of mixes the raising of fish or aquaculture with other aquatic animals, and hydroponics, which is basically growing the plants without any soil. And apparently this system helped to develop a balanced ecosystem. You start with a fish raised in a tank where it, produces all the waste. And then through a biological filtration system, you just extract the beneficial bacteria, and that's where you eventually feed your plants, which are grown in water, in a soil-less medium, so without any soil. And that helps because you can sort of recycle the water in a system, sort of in a closed loop system.
So what you have there is not just plants being grown, but plants in conjunction with animals, fish, and it's a matter of using water efficiently. So it actually marshals several specialties together to concentrate on plant growing in an efficient manner.
Right, and that's a little different from regular farming because it actually uses about 90% less water. So even though you're using the water, you don't have the evaporation because it's in an internal closed loop system. It's more sustainable, and there's minimal environmental impact. So, but I think we should probably officially define what urban vertical farming really is.
Well, to be a little more specific, we have developed a method of growing crops vertically stacked in layers with controlled environments, thank you greenhouse technology, within urban spaces.
That's interesting.
Yes, these farms use these techniques that we've discussed before and bring them all together in one place.
So what's unique about it? Instead of using regular sunlight, like what types of lighting do you need?
Well, in the area of controlling your environment, not depending on outdoors with the sun and the rain, lighting has become very specialized thanks to technology of LED. Which the lights that you see in very bright signs on the highway.
But so that's not the fluorescent lighting, the ones that flicker in the office buildings.
It's a special technology which is very inexpensive and very bright and efficient for the use.
Okay.
But it has, it's cheaper for one thing, but it also is specific. It's a laser emitting diode, what it stands for. But it's specific for the spectrum of light that's emitted. And some plants are favorable to one spectrum as opposed to another. And with LEDs, you can control the spectrum that you expose the plants to, which you can't do by screwing in a light bulb of 60 watts.
So, like, each plant has a different type of ultraviolet
or appetite.
or appetite for a certain spectrum of light.
Right.
And you can sort of fine tune it to just the lighting for that, sort of customized lighting just for that plant.
And another advantage is that the LEDs are very cool. They're not hot like the incandescent lights, which in fact were so hot that they made toy ovens for little girls in the decades ago.
Oh,
ovens with
easy,
a light bulb in it.
Easy bake.
Yes, easy bake. That's how you take advantage of the inefficiency. But LEDs are efficient, so you have low heat, so you don't burn the plants. You have specific spectrum where they come into account, and you have economy because they're very cheap and a lot of illumination for the money you put in for it.
Well, and another way you could save money is that if you don't have the heat, you don't need the air conditioning systems that
That's
you need
right.
to
You don't
cool
need
it down, right?
You don't need to correct for overheating because there is no overheating, so no air conditioning cooling systems are necessary.
And I think there's quite a few companies in California that actually harness vertical farming as their main sort of mode of operation. Like we have plenty in Compton, Badia, Iron, let's see, Bowery Farming, Aero Farms, Bright Farms, Freight Farms, the Iron Ox, Gotham Greens, GP Solutions, InFarm. I mean,
well, it'll be interesting to know what they're doing because these are new technologies being developed, and it must be provoking a lot of research.
Yeah.
Plus consumer activity as well.
Well, like Plenty, which is in Compton, they started off as vertical farming in California, and I believe they're moving now more towards berry farming for whatever their strategy is.
So they're growing crops that the consumer would be familiar with.
Right. Everyday vegetables. They have a way of producing, or at least they had a way of producing about 4.5 million pounds of produce every single year just by using a building about the size of a city block. They're sold at places like Bristol Farms, Walmart, Whole Foods Market, and some online apps as well. They have a sort of a unique way of yielding, I heard, up to 350 times greater per acre compared to conventional farming. So,
that's pretty impressive.
And they're doing it without pesticides, without herbicides or fungicides. So, they're able to really sort of improve upon traditional farming, and they are indoors, which means that they're not as susceptible to changes in the weather.
Right. So it's a variation on greenhouses, again, isolating the crop from the outside.
Exactly.
Unpredictable weather.
And then if you want to go onto your online apps like Amazon Fresh or Good Eggs or Imperfect Foods or Misfit Markets or Instacart, Gelson's, Bristol Farms, and Whole Foods, they all have access to that type of thing.
Right.
So that's what they do. Now, there are some other really interesting agricultural type companies, smaller companies, which are in California. So,
well, they have a different clientele.
Yeah.
We've just been speaking about the ordinary
consumer like
with
salad
rice,
greens and all
right,
that.
carrots and pears and so on, and lettuce. But there is the
Algae Bioscience. They're based in Berkeley, and they really are more looking at farmers as their consumer.
what do farmers need?
So, for example, cows often make methane, which apparently is not only stinky, but impacts the environment. And so they have a kelp-based solution, which actually reduces methane emissions and also improves the feed efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
In Menlo Park in Northern California, Windfall Bio, they also serve farmers by creating a methane-eating microbe that converts methane gas into organic soil nutrients. So that helps.
It's a fertilizer enhancement then.
Right. But they take it from the methane, and it also helps to offset their carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's also, I see, crop enhancement done by
they're in
crop
San Jose.
enhancement
They're in
company.
San Jose, I think.
Yeah, and farmers profit or benefit from them because they design sustainable solutions protecting crop yields enhanced profitability using advanced chemistry and material science.
And then there's also something called Amped Innovation, PBC. I think they're in Redwood City, not too far away from San Francisco. And they are more looking at businesses because they offer sort of off-the-grid refrigerators and freezers for a lower cost. And this really helps developing communities who want to sell things like drinks or meat or local fish, and they just don't want to, or they don't have the ability to buy a full-blown official freezer. They don't have the infrastructure. So this is something that can help them with off-the-grid small business development.
Right.
Agrotech drone. Now this supports farmers because they have crop spraying drones that improve the efficiency and save time. And they definitely reduce the cost of agriculture because you don't need to gas up a crop dusting airplane in order to do that.
Right. The helicopters that used to be used in the old days are very, very expensive. And single engine small planes, also expensive.
Yeah, exactly. And you also need the runway to be able to do that. With a drone, you don't need any of that. Then ISO Food Trace, they're also based in Berkeley, but they have a presence in Hong Kong as well. And they use isotope analysis for tracing food. And this helps to provide geographical verification about where the food all is. Twin Farms in Los Angeles, they also help business growers connect with buyers, small businesses that want to buy their food so that they can reduce the food waste and also help with this whole supply chain and a fair return for small farmers.
But then I see there's Wild Genomics, which offers farmers and foresters genetics and bioinformation tools for monitoring, early detection of invasive species,
Right.
supporting regeneration farming practices. Now, you may think we've gone off the vertical farming theme, but there always is an interchange, and here's a good example. If you have early detection of illness or disease in a plant, that applies equally well to outdoor farming and vertical farming.
Absolutely. Whether it's a disease at the cellular level or a pest that gets introduced, you want to be able to detect that pretty quickly.
They're not isolated from each other necessarily.
Right. You don't want to lose your crop. And as a side note, I heard that some dogs have been trained to be able to sniff out sick crops. So you can actually train a dog and have them walk up and down your small farm and have them identify which plants or trees are diseased and might need to be eradicated. So you don't lose your entire crop. Next Water is another one which develops a plasma-based technology which helps with water treatment. And so that's sort of an interesting little company.
And again, that would apply to vertical farming and outdoor farming.
And also being able to help you get fresh water.
Yeah.
Now, Interstellar Labs in Los Angeles, they have controlled environments, biofarms, which actually leverages a lot of artificial intelligence to help support plant growth in not only our local farms, but also in outer space. GlowGens in Sacramento serves farmers by producing organic fertilizer and nutrients to enhance the soil health. And Terra Shroom in Los Angeles actually helps customers with automated mushroom growing chambers. This means that as a home hobbyist, you can grow your own set of shiitake mushrooms.
Oh.
Then Blumitra in San Mateo, they remove atmospheric carbon and provide a scalable, cost-effective soil health solution. And they also allow you to sell carbon credits and share the revenue with regenerative growers. So that's kind of interesting.
So, not to ignore the bees that are necessary to agriculture, there's Beewise in Sacramento, and they again help farmers with autonomous beehives powered by AI and robotics to improve pollination and honey production, reducing bee mortality. And we've learned from recent news events we are really dependent on the honeybees and the
Pollinators.
pollinating bees.
Right,
Absolutely
right.
an essential element.
So that would be interesting to find out more about that. And Lithos Carbon in San Francisco, they target farmers in carbon markets by removing atmospheric carbon to improve the overall health of the soil. And also, as a side bonus, it increases crop yields. And also, they deal with the carbon credits. So from the land. That's actually in Ukaipa, and they develop indoor vertical micro farms, and they use renewable energy and automations in order to benefit the farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Then in New York, there's a small little company called Solwatt, and they serve aqua farmers and researchers by providing eco-friendly herbal medicine solutions for aquatic health and aqua farming and other food safety.
Right, the quality of the water is important for vertical farming and outdoor farming, of course.
And
yes.
herbal medicines.
Right.
So why do you think that the whole concept of vertical farming is actually difficult for some people to get into if they wanted to start it as a business?
Well, I don't know if difficult is the right word. There are speed bumps and obstacles.
Well, like what?
You have brand new equipment that you need, LED lighting and climate control systems, which may not be widely available, the way you can get shovels and pickaxes and trowels. And
But how do you think that we could resolve that?
well, again, government subsidy or grants and with tech companies can offset these costs. And
Okay.
very often government does help in a burgeoning industry to get started in just this way.
To help the small businesses, yeah. But what do you think about, I mean, like, why else? Why else would
Well,
somebody...
we have energy demand, the
Okay.
lighting and climate systems. We're seeing that in the AI field, that suddenly there's a
demand.
demand on the power for the computers,
Oh,
and the same
and
with this.
Bitcoin also, right?
Yes.
The more AI you use, it's useful, but it does consume a lot
Right.
of electricity.
And if you say, well, I'm not going to depend on the outside environment, the outside rain patterns, means you're inside and you're dependent on artificial lighting, even if it's efficient LED. You still
Good
have
point.
to pay for that.
So how would you fix
So-
that? How would you resolve that?
Well, you try to get your power from solar and wind, because that is recyclable and essentially unlimited. So you can do
Okay.
effect savings there. But the infrastructure isn't fully developed, so that's part of the obstacles or the bump in the road, as mentioned.
So the other thing is that I don't know how you could grow something like corn. Corn's a very tall crop.
That's space consuming, right?
So you'd have to have, so a lot of vertical farming has shelves where the bottom of one shelf has the lighting in order to light the crop down below it. But if you have something tall like corn,
You intersperse
yeah,
crops.
yeah. So I
Right.
think that would be a challenge. So we'd have to, I guess, figure out how to.
Well, research
that.
has shown, for example, with fruit-bearing trees, research has developed species and breeds of trees that are short, so they're easy to pick.
Oh, well, yeah.
So very often you come with a tree that's too tall for easy picking. You just keep developing genetically until it meets your agricultural needs.
And maybe I'm boxing myself in by assuming that corn needs to grow vertically. Maybe somebody would plant corn in a wall so it grows perpendicular to the wall. So so it grows out of the wall,
Right.
parallel to the floor.
Make it horizontal so it looks
Horizontal
like it's falling
corn.
asleep. Yeah.
Horizig corn.
Right.
And then what about the cost of things, do you think? You think, a lot of people are looking for organic foods, and that's expensive because you have to become a
Well,
certified organic farmer.
Acceptability is part of the problems. We see that even in a parallel way with electric vehicles. If people are enthusiastic, then the cost can go down when there's the demand. And the same with this vertical farming. If there's a demand, the cost will go down.
So it has to be culturally accepted.
Educational component is necessary, right?
Okay, so not only does the public need to be educated on the benefit of pesticide-free farming, which you can have when you're indoors, but they have to be, I guess, made aware of the fact that empty spaces, empty warehouses could be converted into a whole farming instance. Maybe have office buildings have a certain portion of their floor space dedicated to growing something that people can eat.
Right.
But I know that there are some places around the world that have done this, right? Can you think of any?
Well, I've heard of Singapore, which is developing urban farming. Very innovative. They have something called the Sky Greens facility, which uses rotating vertical farms to optimize sunlight exposure, which is interesting because you are using the outside sunlight. And it's a hybrid then. You're using sunlight and vertical farming techniques.
And what other places do you think are considered leaders in this space?
Well, there's some company, Aeroforms in the USA, a leader in farming, producing greens with 95% less water and 0 pesticides, which is an impressive statistic.
And what about Europe? Are they doing anything?
Well, there is InFarm,
Mm-hmm.
which installs modular vertical farms in the grocery stores and restaurants, which is super local farm to table.
Wow, so you can say, I want to order a salad in a restaurant, and they say, excuse me while I
Yeah.
go to my salad wall
Yeah.
and snip, get you some
Right.
fresh produce and serve it to you right then and there, like harvested 10 minutes
Right.
earlier.
Go to the next room.
Yeah, go to the salad room. So it's not a salad bar, it's a salad room.
Right.
And then, of course, we already talked about Plenty in Compton, USA, and they're focusing on some other vertical and berry farm type things. And then FAO, they run pilot projects, and I think they're really kind of supported by the United Nations.
It sounds more like a research activity.
Yeah, I think
Since it's pilot projects, that usually means research.
they're always trying to identify how to address places with food insecurity.
Right.
In order to help people with that. But now we want to know, why should we go through the effort? What are the advantages of this?
Well, we've actually come across many of them, that the land use outside is, the need for that is reduced, and
Mhm.
you can also use urban areas which are possibly underused,
And
like abandoned buildings and so on. Or areas that are
exactly,
built up.
exactly. And you can also save the forest.
Right.
You don't have to chop down a whole bunch of trees and everything to grow a crop, like coffee.
So you put less stress on the land, and you
Mhm.
put less stress on water needs, as a matter of fact. You can be more efficient with that.
Yeah, and we're always
And if you're
needing that.
Thirdly, if you're closer to your customers, being smack in the middle of a city, transportation and distribution costs are cut down.
As a matter of fact, I heard in a busy metropolis like New York City, they had a workout studio in the middle of one of these busy buildings, and they went ahead and they gutted it, put in some of those library shelves that you can crank, and converted those to farming shelves, and they were able to grow some exotic herbs and spices that were short, and they could bike deliver to all the high-end restaurants in Manhattan all the best and finest herbs and spices that they could use. And of course, when they place their order, they would have to place it like a month in advance, because you have to grow the crop specifically for them.
But you get it very fresh.
But you get it
Again,
fresh
farm
even
to table.
in the middle of the city, exactly. And so that creates jobs.
Mhm.
So we've talked about vertical farming in the Southern California area.
Also,
and
it's season proof. You can grow crops all year round.
Good point. Yes. So you don't have to worry about the climate. You don't have to worry about farming technology to minimize water in a region, because you already are in a closed loop system. And it contributes to local food supplies. So we have different aspects to consider when you're thinking about vertical farming. For example, what are you going to plant?
Well, some crops are more suitable than others.
Okay, so you want short, leafy, herby, microgreeny type things to grow.
They seem to respond best to the vertical farming techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas root plants, beets and potatoes, which require
radishes,
soil and
carrots.
so on, tend not to do as well. The techniques not yet developed doesn't say anything about the future, but so far.
Right. And I think that there's some developments in probably aeroponics or something like that, but we still need to see what that's going for. Did I say aeroponics? I meant hydroponics.
Oh, okay.
Let me just edit myself right then and there. But it's great that you can actually integrate that into busy places that normally would be miles away from a fresh grocery store.
Right, so distribution is made more efficient.
And you can put it in places that have low water or need to conserve water, drought-prone areas, so you can have that in a closed loop system. And if you are able to use solar power or wind power or some other natural resource to power the lighting aspect of it, then you also have energy efficiency. And there's some economic considerations. What do you think those would be?
Right, well, The land, certainly, it doesn't take 160 acres. You can have maybe just one building with 4 or 5 stories, and that would have an equivalent crop yield.
Then that's all.
And,
Then all you need to worry about is how
Right.
much labor you need to hire and who you sell
Right.
it to.
Right, and since everything is in one place more or less, the labor costs should be less because you don't have to fan out over such a large area.
And I'm sure California, especially Southern California, would probably have some guidelines, some permits, some regulatory considerations that you probably could go to discuss.
Are you
Right.
reading all of these?
But when we're talking about is some analysis type things, and yes, we are in fact looking at what are the key things that we should consider when
Well-
we're trying to figure it out.
Now you have your cost benefit analysis.
Okay.
And the productivity of vertical farms compares to, say, traditional farms. Production of items per square foot.
So how much
So
can you
the-
produce? Can you produce
Right.
more per square foot
And
versus a
Very
conventional
often
farm?
you can do more
Better.
than using, yes.
Okay, and energy?
And the energy spent also can be much better with vertical farming than with traditional farming techniques.
Okay.
Right.
And then would you be able to do any trend analysis when you're thinking about future viability? If, say, for example, if an investor said, when will I get a profit from this?
Well, sure, these things come into play in every business, but as we mentioned before, the more demand there is, the more favorable are the financial returns.
And people's demand for fresh produce might actually make it more popular, more ubiquitous.
Seems
So-
to have many advantages for the consumer.
So what do you think would be your final thoughts about this topic on urban vertical farming?
Well, it's very promising, and as cities get more populated and the population of the earth increases, we need to be more efficient with the production of food for the population.
Okay.
And vertical farming seems to be just an absolute necessity because there's almost nowhere else to go once we use all the outdoor land. So yes, a very promising way that would benefit the population.
You get fresh food immediately. So
Fresh, cheaper, more controlled.
no
yes.
pesticides,
Right, less
all of that.
susceptible to drought and so on.
More reliable.
Right.
Excellent. So how can you get involved? Well, you can look up local urban farming initiatives in your area. You can see if there's another business that you want to partner with. You can call up your local grocery store and see if they sell anything that is done by a pesticide-free local farm. And you can also advocate for local policies in your city, area, or county. And of course, you can also try growing it on your own. They have kits that you can buy where you can do a very, very small experiment by growing a head of lettuce, maybe some tomatoes, some herbs that would be great in a salad dressing or cooking. And you can see the benefits of having fresh produce right there, grown indoors and possibly near the kitchen.
But since you're talking about vertical farming, if you are going to grow lettuce, you're talking about at least 2 heads of lettuce.
That's
one
true,
on top
yes.
of the
Countertop farming, yes.
Right. Or else there's no vertical aspect to it. I thought that was important to mention.
That is important to mention. So, well, I want to thank you for joining us in the Bond Report. We want to grow a greener future together, maybe one leaf at a time. But until next time, as Joe Bond would say, until we bond again.
Yay.